broadcast of the regular meeting of the Executive Committee will now begin.
Good morning and welcome to the regularly scheduled Executive Committee meeting for November 4th, 2020. My name is Jacob Fry. I am the chair of this committee, and as we begin, I will note for the record that this meeting has remote participation by committee members and city staff as authorized under Minnesota Section 8.0 to the local public health emergency. And at this time, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify we have a quorum for the meeting.
Councilmember Gordon.
Here.
Jenkins.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Bender. Mayor Fry.
Here.
There are 4 members present.
Record that we do have a quorum and can therefore proceed with the business that's before us today. Colleagues, our agenda is before us and I'll move to adopt the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion or amendments on the agenda? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bender. Mayor Fry.
Aye.
There are 4 ayes.
That carries and the agenda is adopted. Next, we have the acceptance of the minutes from our regular meeting on October 20th, and I move acceptance of those minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will call.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bender. Mayor Fry.
Aye.
There are 4 ayes.
All right, that brings us to our discussion items, and the first item is item number 3 on the agenda. It's a regular update from our Human Resources Department regarding waivers granted since the implementation of the city's hiring freeze, and this is a report scheduled to be received at every executive committee meeting while the hiring freeze is in effect. And I'll recognize Deb Kruger from the city's HR department to give the update.
Thank you, Mayor Fry. Committee members, my name is Deb Kruger. I am with the Human Resources Department, joining you this morning to give an update on the hiring freeze waiver exemption process since the last presentation on October 20th. There is a PowerPoint slide deck. If we could have that queued up. Thank you. Again, so the hiring freeze has been in effect since March 31st of 2020. Became part of the executive committee cycle on May 1st. So the report update for today will cover hiring freeze waivers that have been submitted and have gone through the full process as of October 6th of 2020. Next slide. I'm sorry, one more. Thank you. To date, we have had 105 hiring waivers, exemptions, forms received. Of those, 86 have been approved for hire. 8 of them have had partial approvals of some of the positions requested, and 11 have been denied. The difference in the waivers since the October 20th report, we've had an additional 21 waivers go through the hiring process, and I will talk about each one of them individually on the next slide. The next slide is a department summary of those city departments that have requested exemptions to hire for their positions. As you can see, the departments that have requested waivers are down the left-hand side, everyone from 311 to regulatory services. The next column over, the 105 waivers that have been submitted as of October 6th. Of that, the 94 that have been fully or partially approved. The number of hires that have been comprised of those 105 94 waivers that were approved was 3,763 positions total. By far the majority of those have, of course, been, again, seasonal in the elections area of the city clerk's office, as well as a couple of hundred interns over the summer that were paid through a grant by the state of Minnesota, and then about 100 temporary hires to complete capital construction projects in public works. Of those 3,763 positions, the cost in 2020 was estimated to be about $13 million, coming out of all different funds, capital construction funds, some grant funds, some general funds. And then to the right of that, the number of permanent positions of that 3,763 approved hires, 98.5 of those positions have been for permanent positions at the city. And the cost, I've got an echo. The cost for those 98 positions on 2020 is about $6.5 million. 11 waivers have been denied, encompassing 13 positions. I'm going to go off the slide deck for just a moment and give you an update on the 21 additional waivers that have been submitted and approved. Of those 21 waivers, it encompassed 113.5 positions, 16 of which were for permanent hires. 91 were for additional seasonal election hires through, I believe it's for another week. Those additional 91 seasonal election hires were to help as the city clerk's office expanded the number of ballot drop-off locations and continued absentee ballot processing. The 16 permanent hires were for a 311 shift supervisor due to a vacancy there, a recent vacancy. In the city clerk's office, we had 2 waivers approved. One was for a legislative clerk. That role provides administrative support for council and committee meetings, such as this one. And one was for an enterprise information management analyst position, and that was to fill the vacancy that was transferred over from the Minneapolis Police Department information records area that was part of the 2020 amended budget. In finance, 2 waivers were approved for permanent positions. One was for an associate buyer, and that role ensures that all small contracts go through the target market program and creates all the purchase orders at the city. The second position in finance that was approved was for an accounting technician, and this particular role processes vendor payments, so collecting revenue for the city. There were 4 approved hires in the fire department. All 4 of them are promotions. 3 promotions for fire motor operator. That role drives and maintains the equipment, particularly the vehicles in the fire department, and then 1 promotion for fire captain. There was 1 approved hire in the human resources department for a permanent position for an HR associate representative. That position supports the benefits area and also supports the monitoring and reporting of the Affordable Care Act per federal mandate. In the intergovernmental relations department, there were 2 approved hires. One was for a senior governmental relations representative. It is 1 promotion to support, this role supports the city's agenda for the 2021 Minnesota legislative session. As the director retired, the former senior governmental relations rep promoted into that department head position. And so promoting 1 person into that vacancy. And then the second approved hire was for a government relations rep to backfill that promotion as well, so that it becomes a fully staffed department. 1 approved hiring waiver for the internal audit department, very small department of 4 individuals. It's to have a permanent hire for the director of internal audit, where we've had an interim director since last February. 2 approved hires in the Public Works Water Division. 1 is for coordinator water pumping station. It is a promotion. And really the promotion is into sort of this interim role for succession planning. A very long tenured supervisor of the water pumping station is retiring. And so this role will oversee the facilities that house the equipment used in the production of the city's drinking water. And then the second position approved for hire in Public Works Water is for a senior water treatment operator. Again, it is a promotion of a current city employee, and this role acts as a lead worker in the operation and maintenance of the city's water treatment system. And then one permanent hire in regulatory services, particularly in the Minneapolis Animal Care and Control Shelter for an animal care technician 2, who provides the critical care and support of the animals that are housed at the animal shelter. Of the 98.5 positions that have been permanent positions that have been approved to date, when the 2020 modified budget was adopted, at that point, as of June 1st, we had 275 positions. We were sort of using that as a benchmark to see how effective the hiring freeze was in saving money at the city. And so of those 275 as a benchmark as of June 1st, 98.5 have been approved to fill. And we've also had an additional 145 vacancies since June 1st, which would put us, right around 319 positions to date. So from keeping positions vacant for realize additional cost savings at the city, I think the hiring freeze has continued to be effective. I'm going to go to the next slide. In the slide,
if you could pause just briefly, as Council Vice President has a question or comment.
Absolutely.
Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mayor Fry. Ms. Kruger, just a couple of things. Can you please, just for my own reference, define what a partial waiver is? And then I'm curious if the water department retirement that you referred to, was that in response to our early retirement incentives, if you are aware of that?
Mr. Mayor, Council Vice President Jenkins, yes, a partial approval where the department asked for more than one position to be filled, and the review committee and elected officials, the mayor and council president Bender, approved something less than what they asked for. So if they asked for 3 positions, they may have granted one approval and denied the others. So they were partial approvals. And then the long-standing retirement in the water department was not due to the retirement incentive. Employees cannot begin to opt into that retirement incentive program until December 7th. So this was something that was planned. I believe he retires at the end of December. And so they're planning for that retirement.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And then again, in response to Council Vice President Jenkins' request a few executive committee meetings ago around the workforce diversity impact in filling the positions that have been granted through the hiring waiver exemption process. Again, the 98.5 permanent positions that have been approved, 50 of them have been filled as of October 28th. And the next 3 slides will show the demographic breakdowns of those, whether they were new hires or promotions, by gender, by race and ethnicity, and then by hire type. So by gender, there have been 2 additional hires since the last report on October 20th. You will see on the left-hand side of the screen, that was the previous report on October 19th of the 48 hires that had been had come to fruition and hires were made. 33 of those 48 positions had been male, 15 were female. And then the chart to the very right is the updated numbers. So it's 50 positions, 2 additionals, 1 male and 1 female have been hired since the last report. So 34 males total, 16 females total, for 68% male, 32% female. So that our female number increased, by 1. Hires by race and ethnicity. Again, the 2 additional hires since the last committee report. Both of the employees hired were BIPOC employees. So the chart on the right shows the percentages as of 10/28, and again, that's the 50 hires. 36 of those 50 were white employees for 72%, and 14 were BIPOC employees for 28%, which is an increase over the last report. And then the third chart is hires by hire type. Again, 2 additional hires since the last report out. Both of them were new hires. They did not include any promotions. Excuse me. On the left-hand side chart, it shows the last report for new hires as of 10/19, there were 20. And then the chart just to the right of that is the new hires as of 10/28, which includes now the additional 2 for 22. So 10 of those new hires were female, and 9 of those new hires were BIPOC employees. For 45% of our new hires, which have been not quite half of the hires total, 45% have been females and 41% have been BIPOC. And then on the chart on the right shows again the promotions, which did not change over the last report. There have been a total of 28 promotions of the 50 hires. 6 of them were for female and four were BIPOC employee promotions. If there are any questions around the demographics, I'd be more than happy to pause and answer those questions. Otherwise, I know that Budget Director Micah Intermill is here as well and has joined to give an update on the financial cost savings associated with the hiring freeze to ensure that we're still sort of meeting our goal in financial savings.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Mayor Fry. You know, Ms. Kruger, I don't have any questions. I do want to just acknowledge and my gratitude for disaggregating this data and keeping us apprised of how these waivers are impacting our diversity goals. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Do you have anything further?
I do not. I would turn it over to Budget Director Intermill.
Mr. Intermill.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Fry and members of the committee. Again, my name is Micah Intermill, City Budget Director, here to give a brief update on the status of where we are with the cost containment measures included in the budget revision for 2020. So could I have the next slide, please? So just as a brief reminder, the 2020 revised budget, which we all worked through this summer, included a hiring freeze that contained costs to the tune of $23 million across all funds and a wage freeze that contained costs to the tune of $6.1 million across all funds. So in total, we are expecting to save about $29 million in payroll costs, regular payroll costs, excluding overtime, in 2020 through these efforts. When I was here at the end of September, and at that point we had numbers through August. And when we met, we were coming in about $4 million ahead of where we would have expected had all things been equal. But at the time I mentioned, you know, we in finance expect some catch up as we get towards the end of the year. There are some wrinkles that we noted just in the way that we had budgeted for elections more broadly, with the dollars being shown as sort of a broad contractual services bucket. Then elections hired their great team of poll workers, and so those costs showed up as payroll. And so that was some of the skewing of the data where we showed personnel expense where it wasn't budgeted as personnel expense, yet it was still in the budget. So all of that, if we could go to the next slide. This shows where we are through September, and it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but the sort of pro rata budget for 2020 would suggest we should be at just under 350 million for these payroll costs, and right now we ended September at 351.5 million. So that gap, what had been a $4.1 million variance, is now a $1.7 million variance. And so, as we expected, we are sort of landing the plane gently, as it were. And so we haven't landed it yet, so we need to keep our seatbelts on. But things are coming in just as we had expected. Could I have the next slide, please? So then, yep, the last point is the revised budget also included $4.3 million of budgetary leave and furloughs. Those actions are underway as planned. Budgetary leave started as early for some folks as June. Furloughs started towards the end of September and are continuing through the year. So I think from a finance standpoint, we continue to remain confident that the plans that were put into place were effective in containing costs, and we don't see any flags at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. Any questions for Mr. Ruff? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to file that report. And item number 4 on our agenda is a report relating to leadership development and performance evaluation processes, and that's I believe is the presentation that was rescheduled from last executive committee meeting to this one, and that presentation will be given by Dawn Baker from Human Resources and our Intercity Coordinator, Mark Ruff.
Thank you so much, Mayor Fry and committee members. Good morning. I'm with you this morning to propose a new program and approach to leadership development aimed at our department head level leaders and focused on the leadership skills that are needed to foster a racially equitable work environment. Mark's going to join me to walk through part 2 of this proposal, which is to share a new method for department head performance evaluation. And we're sharing this proposal with you today to seek your feedback, also your knowledge about other organizations and what they are doing in terms of leadership development to foster racial equity. And next slide. Much of our city's attention, and rightfully so, is turned outward to the community as we make strides to correct historical racial injustice. However, it's important to attend to what the city as an employer is doing to support and empower its employees as they do this important work. And we have a strategic racial equity goal to increase the hiring and retention of people of color and Indigenous people in the city's workforce. And while we've made progress in attracting and hiring people of color, it's been more challenging to encourage them to stay. And so to do that, we need to continue to try to create and foster a workplace environment that is welcoming, respectful, and inclusive. Our city leaders, especially our department head level leaders, are instrumental in creating and fostering this culture across our various departments and divisions. And that's why we're focusing this proposal on them and their important role. Next slide. When the city adopted a cultural agility job success factor several years ago, we started to explore and describe the behaviors that we wanted to see more of from employees at all levels, including our leaders. For leaders, these behaviors and actions include role modeling desired behaviors and language, conducting discussions with employees about behavioral work expectations, not just what gets done, but how it gets done. Encouraging continued dialogues and learnings around intentional efforts to overcome systemic and systematic racism. However, what we're noticing is that among top leaders, these behaviors occur inconsistently, and in some areas of the city aren't happening much at all, and employees notice. We also need to further articulate what the mayor, the city council believes and wants when it comes to these leadership behaviors. And also, what do our leaders expect of themselves? The department head performance review process has been inconsistent over the past decade. And so in addition to this leadership development plan, we're recommending a newly designed performance review process that is simple, provides useful and actionable feedback, and isn't perceived as punitive. Next slide. This is our recommended program framework. I'm just going to briefly walk through each program step. Defining leadership expectations is the initial step, where we invite stakeholders in to articulate in behavioral language what we expect of our leaders, particularly when it comes to creating the anti-racist culture we want to see. This is so that our leaders will know what to live up to. Seek feedback is the next step. That's where we provide opportunities for each program participant to get data about their current performance against the expectations. And it's really a nice timing that our employee survey is going to have a special section containing items about racial equity. And those results are going to be available to our leaders in December. So that will be a timely source of that data. Then during the plan development step, my team would work with each leader in conjunction with their own leader to develop an individual learning plan to guide their learning journey. We recognize when it comes to fostering an equitable, inclusive workplace, our leaders are at different starting places with their skill levels, and so the IDP would customize their learning accordingly. And then the majority of the program is the learning and development programming itself, experiencing the learning, and we would look for each leader to hold themselves accountable to participate in both individual and group learning experiences, and more about that in just a moment. And then finally, at the close of the program, about a year from the inception of it, we would ask each participant, along with their leader, to evaluate how well did they do against those individual learning plan goals. And we would look at other data and indicators as well, including a repeat of our employee survey to see if this program helped make a difference. Next slide. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay. You might remember Leadership U. It's been our flagship leadership development program since about 2015. And I've been told that our department heads went through it first. To this day, this construct, lead self, lead others, and lead the city, has really continued to surface and live on, and I hear it articulated by these leaders. And so we want to keep the best of that program as we go forward to bring in this new development program. Because it continues to resonate with our leaders, we'll continue to capture this and construct the design of the program around these three leadership levels. And next slide. This timeline represents a phased approach to the 5 program steps I described earlier. We'll use this month and the part of December to engage leadership to formalize and articulate those expected performance competencies that they all agree to hold themselves accountable to. And then we'll finalize this proposed structure, make final decisions on the actual learning content. And then in early 2021, leaders will begin step 1 of the program, looking at their data and planning their development. And the remainder of the year will be participating in collective and individual development. And then in early 2022, we'll measure results. Next slide. I just want to acknowledge that it's not easy for leaders to adopt new and different ways of leading. And so for a program like this to be successful, leaders need support and affirmation from their own leaders, from their peers, and from the people who report into them. I want to acknowledge the elements listed on this slide. If they are in place, will contribute as much to the success of the program as the learning content itself. So I'll pause here for any questions and comments, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ruff to talk about the updates to the department head performance evaluation process.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Baker? Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, I'm Mark Ruff, City Coordinator. I want to thank Dawn and especially Patience Ferguson for HR's leadership in this area. And as we talked about at the last executive committee meeting, this is not just about the two of us or the three of us. This is a broad group who has provided input into this process and will continue to provide input into this process, because as Dawn mentioned, it's not just enough to hire more leaders who are BIPOC leaders, and that is clearly a priority, and we have made progress in that goal, but it is furthering than just this cultural agility work that is so critical for the city to thrive, as we have more and more residents who are immigrants, more and more residents who are understanding the need for change and change in a hurry. And leadership needs to come not just from our leaders who are people of color, but also from white leadership as well. And so I really am grateful for that broad brush and broad array of folks who are providing input to this. The remaining part of this presentation, if we go to the next slide, is really just confirming what happened last year that will continue again this year, which is each charter department head will complete a form, and that form is similar but a little enhanced from last year, that we will be talking about the goals that were last year and then the goals coming up this year, with this emphasis on anti-racist behavior and progress, talking about the aspirational goals of each department leader, and then also guidance from you as elected officials involved in those reviews. And we also want to have a conversation then, not just an annual review, but a conversation with leaders about how it's going in 2021 and what specific areas that you as elected officials and the department heads feel like are getting stuck or that need some readjustment as the year progresses. Next slide. I think that's probably it as far as the presentation goes, Mr. Mayor. I think for us, just speaking on behalf of Dawn and HR, it is really just a check-in with you as the committee. We're not expecting any action or just some guidance, and as Dawn mentioned, some suggestions that you may have as we move into the implementation stage of this at the end of this year and early next year. Be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. Any questions for either Mr. Ruff or Ms. Baker? Seeing no further questions, I'll direct the...
Mr. Mayor, I put myself in the chat there.
Oh, I see you. I see you. My apologies. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank you both for your efforts and the staff team that I know has been talking about this and initiating it. I think some of the slides referenced a little bit that interplay between policymakers, elected policymakers, and staff leaders. And I think as someone who's been involved in a lot of different kind of change in a relatively short time at the city, I will say that, structural institutional change just has to include the leadership of staff leaders and department heads. It really isn't possible for elected officials alone to lead that kind of structural change that sustains over time. And I'm really excited to see the leadership of so many department heads and division directors and staff being empowered, at kind of all levels of staffing and parts of our city enterprise to really lead in this issue, because again, that kind of organizational change, I think, really takes everyone within an organization. It takes us setting aside, I think, some of our hierarchical ideas about leadership and to really empower the voices of all potential leaders in our city who come with life experiences and with just valuable perspectives to help lead our city forward. And so, I know this week is a tense time for everyone, and I think about our city and how I see us moving forward. And, I think this kind of personal work, this employee-to-employee work that I know is happening across our enterprise is really the key to us evolving as a city and making sure that all of our neighbors are safe and comfortable and well cared for, and that we live in the kind of city that we all want to see. So I just want to really thank you all and just offer those reflections about the importance of staff leadership in this kind of structural, institutional change. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Gordon.
Yeah, I appreciate this report and this work. One of the things I've been concerned about is that policymakers haven't really been doing a very effective job in supporting and guiding the leadership within the city. And it looks like this will give us an opportunity to do that and have some kind of a check-in and conversation. I think it's a mistake sometimes if we rely on individual informal conversations with department heads and exchanges over email until there's a reappointment that comes up, and all of a sudden we're panicking about, oh, how are we going to evaluate and assess this and make our decisions about that. So it looked like on one of the slides we were talking about a regular, and I can't see it in front of me right now, conversation with maybe the executive committee, so we can come in and participate in a supportive area. There it is, semi-annual conversation practice, but that was not with us. But then above that, it also says guidance and environment needed from elected officials. And I guess that's a place where we could drill down a little bit. I would advocate an opportunity in a closed session to let our department heads meet and interact in a structured way with the executive committee, so we could participate in an evaluation and in goal setting and in giving support and answering questions. Is that part of this process that you're imagining at this point?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Gordon, if that is that question directed at me, I just want to make sure that if you were looking to me or one of the other committee members.
No, I'm looking to staff. I'm looking to, you would be a great person to respond.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. I certainly would defer to the council president in terms of the council member involvement in this process. I think last time we had either the council president and council vice president, one of the committee chairs along with the mayor participate in the review process, and we certainly could do that again in early 2021 and have that group also be the check-in group. But if you want to broaden it to the executive committee, I just leave that to all of you in terms of that process. Welcome the feedback. I'll just speak for me personally from any of that arranged group as we go through this process. But I agree with you, is that an intentional sit down. I try to do that with the direct reports that I have on a regular basis, even in the midst of everything else happening in the city. That intentionality is important and would certainly echo those thoughts that you put forward.
Well, I'll just add, I do think it is a role of the executive committee. I know that we have made efforts in the past to set up some kind of a structured performance review for our department heads in a conversation and in a supportive way. And when we've got close to doing it well, it seems to have had its benefits. So I don't have any direction or any motion to make right now, but I think we should seriously consider that. I think if there's any committee that has to do with oversight of the department heads, it would be the executive committee.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, no further questions, I'll direct the clerk to file the report. And then the final item on our agenda for today is my nomination to designate Frank Reed as Interim Director of the Civil Rights Department beginning November 21st, 2020, for a period not to exceed 90 days. And I'll move approval of this item. Is there any discussion on the topic? Well, I'll kick the discussion off, and as you know well by now, Director Velma Corbel, the Director of the Civil Rights Department, will be leaving the city of Minneapolis later this month, and we'll certainly have ample opportunity to celebrate Director Corbel's and her accomplishments. But today, I want to nominate Frank Reed to serve as the interim director. Many of you have had the opportunity to work with Mr. Reed. He's extremely accomplished. He served in the Civil Rights Department for quite some time. In many senses, Velma has been preparing him to take on some additional responsibility as well. And prior to Mr. Reed's legal career, prior to his service here at the city, his legal career ranged from advocating for the rights of children with disabilities to representing the rights of clients facing housing discrimination and legal aid. He's done some good work. Very, very much appreciate his work and willingness to step up into this as the interim director position. And again, thank you for your leadership at this time during the transition. And if I'm happy to open it to any other comments as the motion's on the table. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Gordon.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye.
Mayor Fry.
Aye.
There are 5 ayes.
That item passes. And it's item number 5 there is approved. And Mr. Clerk, I do not believe we have any other further items on the agenda today. I apologize, I'm working between my computer here and my phone.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So with that, we have concluded all items on our agenda today, and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.